In this episode, we talk with journalist, storyteller, and children's book author Audrey Galexx. She'll tell us about her years as a journalist working for CNN, and how a piece of advice she received as a preteen affected the rest of her life. Hey there, I'm Maria.
And I'm Stephanie, and we're your hosts for Creative Conversations with Generation Jones.
A podcast where we interview real people of a certain age who have been living a life of creativity.
Some do it for a living, and some do it because it fills their soul. But they all have great stories and pearls of wisdom to share.
With us, so grab a cocktail or two and enjoy.
Yep.
Hey, welcome to Creative Conversations with Generation Jones. Our guest today is the lovely, the talented, the amazing woman with words, storyteller, TV producer, and now children's book author, Audrey Galexx.
Well, thank you so much for having me.
Welcome, Audrey.
Welcome.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
All right, so we start our podcast each time with our first question, which is always, what is your favorite cocktail?
Well, right now it is the Aviation. Yeah, I saw it served one night at a Metro Atlanta restaurant, and I couldn't believe it. This beautiful lavender color. I was like, I'm having what she's having.
All right, and what are the ingredients?
Oh, my gin, creme de violette.
Violette.
Yes, and a cherry liqueur as well, lemon juice, and also I like to add a little dark cherry to it.
And it is beautiful.
It's
Truly.
delicious, too.
And shall we try it?
It's really
A little clinkety clink clink.
L'chaim salud.
I am indeed.
I'll let y'all know, we're drinking out of glasses that were from 1905 from my grandparents' wedding.
Yeah, over a century. And
Wow, 1905.
it's delicious.
It's easy to have a few of those and not realize how they're affecting you. I'll
It's
say
quite
that.
tasty.
And lemony.
Right.
All right, so Audrey, tell us what you want to be when you were young.
Oh my gosh. I think I wanted to be a rocket.
Didn't we all?
Yeah.
Right?
Or,
Come
Marlo
on.
Thomas or Barbara Streisand, and, Hook Omar Sharif, right?
Wow. And did you do any acting, singing, any of those performing things as a child?
Oh my, yes. I was a cloud in the Euripides play of the clouds at whatever, Genesius Guild. But really, aside from that, the only starring role I had was as a nun in middle school in Sound of Music. But really, after that, no.
Where did you grow up?
Oh, the metropolis of Rock Island, Illinois, on the Mississippi River. It's part of the Quad Cities, Western Illinois.
Okay.
Yeah.
And how did you feel growing up there? Was it, was that a nice place to grow up?
Yeah, I really do think it was a nice place to be from. I have still to this day wonderful friendships, a couple of women who I am still friends with, and I think it's because of staying in one place. As my mother liked to say, it was 10 minutes to the airport, and I think growing up I really didn't know what she meant, but I felt very blessed to grow up with my parents as well as my paternal grandmother in town. And,
that's
and
nice,
she was, she was a big inspiration in my life, and she was all of maybe 5'1", but she was larger than life.
Now, you told us a story about growing up as a Jewish girl in a Catholic kindergarten.
Yes.
Tell us that story.
Oh, now I'm trying to remember what it was or which one it was. I think at the age of 4, my parents wanted to send me to school. And of course, they wouldn't accept you at a public school in kindergarten. So they found the Villa de Chantel. And I actually really loved it. I mean, we had ballet class. We had French class. Not that I'm at all fluent in French, but I was one of the others. And there were 2 others. There was Nikki, the little black girl, and Markham, the boy, and then me, the little Jewish girl. And I can't remember if this is a story I told you. I think it might have been, but I pretended to keep kosher because I didn't like the school lunches, and and Sister Christina, she believed me, and she let me bring lunch from home. But it was really kind of magical. I know that there was a time when the students would go to mass. And I would sit out. They didn't make me go, even though I like to look at the little alcoves where the baby Jesus was, like the dolls or something. But they made me sit out on this big throne of a chair, and it was at the sit of a statue of the Virgin Mary, and she was standing on a serpent, and I was eye to eye with that serpent. And it was kind of scary to me, but I like Mary. She's cool.
That's really odd, though.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I'm surprised. I would think they would just make you go into mass with them.
Me.
The Catholic schools that I went to, any of the kids that weren't Catholic still had to go to mass.
I don't know how I got out of it. But I remember going, but then I remember not having to go.
Maybe it was your 5'1" grandmother who said, "My
It could have been.
daughter will not be subjected."
Well, it was really. I had to say it was my grandparents who did pay for me to go, and they were horrified when I came home one night and said, "I wanted to share something that I learned in Catholic school," and it was the Lord's Prayer that I could recite. And, even though I do honestly think that comes from some Jewish liturgy. Maybe I'm wrong.
Well, it probably does.
Yeah, right. They were like, our Father who art in heaven, et cetera, et cetera.
Take her out of that school.
Hallowed be thy name.
Make her stop.
No, what have we done?
So you told us a story about walking a mile in someone's moccasins. That story about the rabbi.
Tell us that story.
So that was my bat mitzvah.
Okay.
So as part of my bat mitzvah, the coming of age ceremony in the Jewish tradition, you generally have, assigned Torah or scripture portion, the 5 books of Moses. And as part of that, you have to also give a little bit of a speech, based on that Torah portion. And I could not think of what to say. And so my dad, for some reason, I don't know where he read it or heard it, but he said, well, there's this expression, that to really know somebody, even your enemy, you have to be willing to walk a mile in their moccasins. And that is an expression that has stuck to me and stuck with me to this day and inspires me. And so actually several years after that, when I was in undergraduate school, I was at the American University in Washington and studying international relations and Middle Eastern studies. I wanted to make peace in the Middle East, of course. Instead of doing what my parents probably wanted me to do, and that was go to Hebrew University, where all their maybe friends' children might have gone for a junior year abroad, I chose to go to the American University in Cairo because I wanted to, quote unquote, know my enemy. And as it turned out, it was a pretty amazing year. This happened to be 1978, 79, and I had interned at the State Department. I don't know if I'm getting ahead of myself here. And then was in Cairo, in Tahrir Square, in the fall of 1978, September, when Anwar Sadat, the president, got back from Camp David. And so then I was there for the whole peace treaty signing, et cetera, et cetera. And being a Jewish person there, it was quite a heady experience. And, a lot of conversation around peace and all that. So it was really, kind of that saying that I had riffed on and reflected on as a 12-year-old, at my bat mitzvah, then kind of came home to roost, almost 10 years later when I was 19, 20 years old, as part of my academic mission in life, which, changed after I got back to the States, but still inspires me to this day.
Wow. Give us a little bit of, the route through your college, where you started, where you ended.
Yeah.
Oh,
gosh.
Just give us a little synopsis, because I know there's a lot.
Yeah. I'd have to have another drink probably to talk about some of it. Well, I ended up at American U in Washington, D.C. I wanted to study international relations and Middle Eastern studies. And again, I wanted to bring peace to the Middle East. And here I was from a small town in Illinois. Who did I think I was? And in some ways I was in over my head. And I have to say, I applied to George Washington, GW, or rather Georgetown. I think the drink is kicking in. Northwestern, University of Illinois, and the American U. And the only school I didn't get into was the Edmund A. Wass School of Foreign Service at Georgetown. And I was like, I was not a happy camper about that. But that's okay. I found out that there's a consortium program. So if you're at any of the DC schools, you can take classes at other places. And that's what I ended up doing, is taking several classes at Georgetown. But, really fell in with a group of internationals at AU And I ended up on a United Nations semester program at Drew University, and then I did the internship at the State Department. And it was interesting. My assignment was to the office that handled Iraq. And my assignment that summer, in part, was to go through, because I was not fluent in Arabic, and I am not now as well, but to go through the English language Baghdad Observer and cut out all the articles about the travels of one Saddam Hussein, who was at the time was vice president. And so, if he was doing a ribbon cutting at a pharmaceutical, plant, wink, wink, nod, nod, could have been, some other facility. But that was very interesting. And then, of course, I did my junior year abroad at American University in Cairo. And I met a woman from Somalia. Her father was with the World Health Organization, and he was studying river blindness in West Africa, and based in Ouagadougou, then Upper Volta. And so they invited me to come down and to travel with them. So that's what I did. I stayed extra and met up with them and then traveled through then Upper Volta. It's now Burkina Faso, but then Mali and Senegal. And then I wasn't feeling well, and I ended up coming back to the States. It was kind of an odyssey getting myself back, and my parents weren't expecting me. But I ended up then staying out of school for a semester because I don't know what I contracted.
You needed a break.
Thank goodness it wasn't, river
Malaria.
blindness, but something like that. Some stomach bug. And then I had gotten myself into a 5-year BA-MPA, Master's in Public Administration program. But I had kind of a weird thing happen, and it does involve a man. And I ended up dropping out of the MPA program with not very many credits left to get it, and coming back to my hometown and going up to Minnesota to my summer camp where I had been a camper and a counselor, and kind of threw myself on them and so, do you have any openings? I was a tennis counselor. I'm not a great tennis player, but I kind of had to get out of D.C. Some weird stuff had happened, and he was sent out of the country, and I just needed to figure out sort of who was I. So long story short, I ended up working for my dad's mattress company and then getting involved in a political campaign, the John Anderson presidential race. And
that was the first person I
You
voted
did?
for. I still have a John Anderson button.
All right.
So that was what, 84? Maybe
80, 80.
Yeah, that was the first one I was legal to vote for, yeah.
And so, strangely, really, I was a lost puppy. And this guy walks into an event one night when Kiki Anderson, John's wife, was speaking. And he was this newspaper reporter, and he interviewed her and then wrote an article, got a byline. I assumed he got paid for this. I was like, I could kind of do this. So I called the guy up, and, turns out he went to Northwestern in Chicago. I'm like, oh, yeah, okay, well, maybe I could do that. And after the election, and of course, Anderson didn't win, although I think he pulled 7% of the vote, which is amazing for an independent candidate. But I moved to Chicago, and I got a job as a paralegal in a big Chicago law firm. I didn't know what the hell I was doing. And that was at the time where you don't have to be, have any certification to be a paralegal. And I was on a great case. I got to admit, I lived in Denver for a few weeks out of each month, and Houston, and then Casper, Wyoming, and Hastings, Nebraska. It was kind of fun and crazy.
Wow.
I was. It was really fun.
Yeah.
Just so you know, I was in charge of document production, which means photocopying. Okay. Oh yeah.
a fancy title.
Big. Yeah. But I ended up applying to grad school at Northwestern in their journalism program, and I got in, and so I decided to go.
That's where you met your husband, right?
No.
Nope.
You know that.
She's
You know
not
that.
there yet.
You know that guy who walked into that speaking engagement that night with Kiki Anderson?
That's your husband?
That's the dude.
Oh my God! Okay.
Yeah.
I love it.
Oversized trench coat,
Got it.
wingtips,
Okay.
like the, sort of the stereotype. All he didn't have was the hat, I think. But he, I was like, looks cute.
A pencil behind his ear.
Yeah. 3 kids, a mortgage later. Oh my God, what was I thinking? But and then got out of journalism school and ended up back in my hometown getting a job at the ABC affiliate. I was a reporter.
TV station.
Yeah.
How did you end up at CNN?
Well, so we started in Moline, Illinois, basically part of what they call the Quad Cities, Rock Island, Moline on the Illinois side of the Mississippi, Davenport and Bettendorf, Iowa on the Iowa side of the Mississippi. So the news director in Moline got a job at the ABC affiliate in Kansas City. So Dave moved down there, and then a few months later, I moved down there, and we moved in together. We started talking about, getting married and all that. Okay. So I said, look, I've spent all this time in the, quote, Arab part of the Middle East. I not only was in, Egypt, but I spent a chunk of time in, North Africa, Morocco, Tunisia, et cetera, Algeria, but also in Jordan and Syria. And I forgot to tell you, I did live with a Bedouin family for about a month in Petra. So that's part of my
By the way.
Yeah. So,
Yeah, in Petra, yeah.
Anyway, so I said to him, like, look, we gotta do the Israel thing, and here he's Jewish, I'm Jewish. It's like, we better do this, So we were living in Kansas City, got married there, put everything in storage, and this was April of '85. And by October, we had moved to Israel, and we had found a work-study program where you do about 6 months of very intensive Hebrew and other studies, and then 6 months, supposedly they help you find a job in your, quote, field of expertise. Well, it's pretty much like, see that phone? It's a local call here, or we're going to take you into Jerusalem, we're going to take you into Tel Aviv, and, go around and knock on doors or whatever. So that's kind of what we did. And it was kind of funny because, we went to the Associated Press, we went to, all these different news organizations. The only person who said, I don't know what we're going to do with you, but we could use an extra couple pair of hands. And that was the CNN bureau in Jerusalem. And Jeff Levine was the bureau chief at the time. And I also think that he was very, he missed being with Americans, So we volunteered there actually for a couple of months. And then after we went down back to the Negev, where our program was in a city called Arad, we got a call from him. And it turns out the bureau producer quit. I will not tell his story, but and he was like, what do I do? Do you guys want to share the job or whatever? And I was like, Dave, I love it down here, and immersing myself in the Hebrew. Why don't you take the job? And so that's really what happened. Dave took the job as bureau producer for CNN in Jerusalem, and we got an apartment. We had made some wonderful friends who found us this amazing apartment. All I can say, it's in the Rehavia neighborhood, if folks know where that is. And we looked out into, I could see across the way Teddy Kollek. He was the former longtime beloved mayor of Jerusalem. He lived next door to us. And from time to time, our street would be shut down because, Ted Kennedy would be visiting or something like that. I mean, it was really beautiful and very tree lined and everything. Anyway, so then the assistant producer quit. And then, long story short, I got her job. And then Dave wanted to come back to the States, and we did. And that's how we ended up back at CNN here. We essentially had to quit our jobs, but then, and reapply here. Dave ended up on the national desk.
And you were a producer at CNN?
I was a news writer for a while,
okay.
And then I worked on a number of feature shows. And I think my last incarnation was with Future Watch. My joke was that any show I worked on, got canceled. But Future Watch was a great show. There were two of us who were correspondents, David George, and you may remember him. And really, I got to do some really fun stuff, and just the future of kitchens and baths, I remember, And then I got pregnant with my first child and took a leave of absence and came back as a freelancer. So
awesome.
Yeah. Okay, let's take a little break and let's have another little clinky clink
Okay.
and sip of
Ooh,
our
yeah.
delicious Aviation clink. We'll be right back. Okay, so tell us about Roots and Wings.
Oh, gosh. I guess I realized after the birth of my first child that she was not going to grow up in the same kind of situation that I did, with at least one grandparent who could tell the family stories. And so I ended up, gathering family stories and thinking, this would be a business, possibly, or some kind of thing where, there got to be other people like me who also want to gather family stories. And then I happened to have coffee with a former colleague and friend of mine from CNN, and she had the same idea too, that, why don't we do these family history or community history videos? So we pooled our meager resources and we started recording the stories of people, like somebody's, grandmother's turning 90, or the parents wanting to do their sort of story as part of their 50th anniversary, or, everybody's coming into town for the bat mitzvah, but, we don't record the bat mitzvah, but, the stories of everybody. And so that's what we started doing for about 10 years, and not only doing these recordings that, became family heirlooms, but then also teaching memoir writing, and then getting a couple of grants to do some projects. One in particular that stands out was in Shermantown, this community at the foot of Stone Mountain. And
Georgia.
we worked, worked with a group of middle school students from this charter school and taught them video production and oral history interview skills.
How fun.
And then they interviewed some of the
Yeah.
elders around the community who had some very poignant memories about, as an African-American child, playing softball with the children of the Grand Dragon of the Ku Klux Klan
my
while their
God.
mother,
Really?
and seeing the...
Well, it is Georgia.
Yeah, that's right. Seeing
I get that.
the crosses burned on the top of
Wow.
Stone Mountain. Yeah, that kind of thing. And that was really very, very meaningful. Being able to document these both family and community histories.
That's wild.
Yeah.
And so how did you get into storytelling?
Oh gosh, I think it was always in my, in my kishkis and my intestines, that I love folk tales and I love storytelling, and maybe it also pulls in that thread of theater from my childhood. And I had this grandmother. Her real name was Rose. Is here I say, but we called her Shuggy. Everybody called her Shuggy.
Shuggy.
And Shuggy
That's a
was
great
this
name.
I love it,
wonderful. Yeah, I think the story goes that I heard my grandfather call her Sugar, but I couldn't pronounce that, and I said Shuggy, and it stuck. So everybody, and you spelled it Sugie like
Okay.
sugar. That's right. And she was just a brilliant storyteller, and she really made the past come alive. I mean, I can tell you about the shtetl that she came from. I mean, I can see it in my mind's eye. And that's really, I think, what I wanted to do is also take some of the, family, community stories, ethnic history stories, and turn them into performance pieces and weave in stories, folk tales, that kind of thing. I just love it. It's, the stories speak to me and on such
Where
a
did you
deep level.
perform them?
Oh, well, I performed at some local storytelling festivals and at actually a national festival. And I also partnered with a couple other people. I was part of an Arab-Jewish storytelling dialogue project called Tapestry for a while with a Lebanese-American woman who, as it turns out, both of us have roots in Clarksdale, Mississippi, of all places.
Wow.
So we were able to, and we were able to kind of talk about how her grandparents and my grandparents never probably would have had any kind of connection with each other, even though they both had these dry goods stores on Sunflower Avenue in Clarksdale. But here, a couple generations later, we could talk about our differences and celebrate our cultures together, that kind of thing, and wish for peace. And I also had a partnership with a Muslim storyteller, and we did a Sarah and Hagar kind of dialogue story project together. And I think for me, storytelling is that way in some ways, to walk in somebody else's moccasins, as I said earlier, as well as there's an expression that, once you've heard someone's story, you can no longer be their enemy. And I think that was really part of it also, is if we share our stories, we can find both our unique differences that we can celebrate, as well as, what we have in common. And I think that was really important to me.
You did some teaching as well.
I did. I taught journalism at Georgia State for one semester. As an adjunct. It was really wonderful. I had a great time in it. I was kind of in between working in the television industry, and a friend of mine went on maternity leave, and they needed somebody to teach a couple of sections of Journalism 101. And honestly, I didn't have a syllabus, so kind of, was very, kind of winged it. But it was really fun. I mean, talk about creativity. It's like, oh my gosh, it's like, what do I do? And for example, I was walking to class one day and the guy was hawking newspapers and he had such a personality. And I was like, there's no way this is all you do, buddy. And he's like, yeah, honestly, I'm a competitive eater. What? And I was like, what? And I was like, oh my God, you've got to come and talk to my classes.
Wow.
You've got to. And so he did. And my assignment was to, I don't know what it was, like write a 2,000-word essay about this guy, and had some fun with that. And
That's
also,
awesome.
there's there's a store down. This was at Georgia State. There's a store down there, and why am I forgetting its name? But it's really an institution. It's the one with the red and white awning on it, and called Walters. I think it's called Walters, something like that. And so I was talking to the students about how stories are right under your nose, right? And you just have to be curious and aware. I said, go find out. Is there a Walter? Who's Walter? So, I got like 2 classes of probably 25 kids each, so 50 kids, were doing that. A few weeks later, I walk into Walter's and I says, excuse me, is there a Walter? And I was like, yeah, he's in back or whatever. I go back there and I introduce myself. I'm this professor, whatever. And he goes, "You're the one." Yeah.
Who sent all those kids in
Oh
here?
my God. Well, it turns out the guy, I mean, it's really poignant. I mean, this guy, he was turning 90 years old, and he was a Holocaust survivor, and he had given all these people opportunities to work in his store who might not otherwise have had some opportunities. And here these students had the chance to learn about the Holocaust, and I suspect many of them were not, familiar with really the stories or had never met a Holocaust survivor.
And you didn't know that when you sent them there,
Oh,
did
no,
you?
I did not. No, I didn't know if there was a Walter. No, I was like, maybe I should have asked him for permission to do that first. But it was a really rewarding experience, but it was just one semester.
Yeah, one semester.
And then I went back to AIB.
What is AIB? Tell us about it.
AIB. Well, AIB started 50 plus years ago as Atlanta Interfaith Broadcasters by a Presbyterian youth minister who wanted to bring together people of different faith traditions, not to proselytize, but to get to know each other as people and to build a better world, almost like, what Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. said, the beloved community, through interfaith engagement, through engagement across races, etc. And so it started as segments on radio and then on television. His first program, in fact, was either Midnight Minister or Sound of Youth, and that's when he brought together kids, African American and white, to talk about the civil rights movement and talk about the war in Vietnam. And then when cable came along, we got a station, and now we are the largest purveyor, creator of original interfaith programming in the United States.
Wow.
And our programming is now really not necessarily specifically only interfaith, but we produce programs that nurture the mind, body, and spirit. And so it ranges from language instruction series to exercise shows to short-form documentaries and interview programs.
Nice.
And
yeah.
And you have a lot of subscribers on that YouTube channel.
Oh my gosh.
Tell us how many
I mean,
subscribers.
it's almost, I'm going to say, I haven't looked
Say it.
recently, it's almost 500,000.
Almost 500,000
It's amazing.
subscribers.
That's
That's
wild.
crazy.
And I think many of them, they love our Spanish language instruction. Believe it or not, our Aramaic programs, and also astrology. Yeah.
And what is your role there?
Well, I'm currently community engagement community engagement director. And so I work on developing partnerships, primarily programming partnerships with other nonprofit organizations. And I still do produce some shows. One is called Making a Difference, and that's where we feature different nonprofit organizations. So if you got a nonprofit you want to feature, let me know. As well as an interview program called At the Table. And in essence, that's where I really feature. Every year we choose a different initiative, a topic to focus on. And it's ranged from everything from the impact of climate change on communities of color and underserved communities to the importance of exercise. And that too has a social justice component to it, because some communities don't have access to safe and clean spaces to exercise.
Mind, body, and spirit.
That's
Yeah,
right.
Indeed.
So I would want to kind of move in a different direction and ask you about your children's book that you just wrote.
Let's
Called
hear it.
Turtle Rocks.
Where are the Kleenex? You got the Kleenex next to
Okay,
you.
got
If you
it,
need
got it.
You got
Okay,
if
it's
you need the
handy.
Kleenex.
Tell us what it's about and what motivated you to write this and all that good stuff.
Well, Turtle Rocks started as a gift to my nieces and nephews 10 plus years ago. It was a little story about some turtles who were trying to get to a lake and they gave up, and then another turtle who, through perseverance and remembering the stories of his ancestors, and puts one little foot in front of the other and gets to the lake, and kind of lay dormant for a while. And I think maybe it was during COVID where I was like, I wonder if that story still exists. I didn't even have it on my laptop. I think I just had a hard copy. And so there I am, like, keying it into my laptop. And I shared it with a couple of people, which I think is really, sometimes it's really hard to share your little darlings with other people because they could criticize or offer constructive criticism, as one of my colleagues did. And because the turtles that didn't make it to the rock, basically, or make it to the pond, rather, they sort of, become rocks. And she said...
They died.
Well, yeah. And she
transformed.
said, like,
Ooh, sad.
what happened to the other turtles? I'm like, oh, my God. So she, as I say, cracked the story open. And that made me really revisit it and say, okay, what if the turtle who had perseverance and stick-to-itiveness and that can-do attitude kind of woke up the other turtles? Like, what was the issue, that they faced, that kind of thing. And it ended up being a really, we went deep with that. We really did, about fear and also, feeling like you were doing what you thought you, quote, should do, or just giving up because something
As opposed to what you should do.
Yeah, what your soul was calling you to do. Right.
Yeah.
And it did become kind of a collaborative process. And what was really important to me also was finding an illustrator who was local. And I did. And I'm going to give her a shout out, Colleen Finn. She really was not just an illustrator, but kind of helped me as a mature voice who's been down this road before, illustrating books, as well as, just a great person. She's really interested in just neurodivergence and creativity. And so we had a lot of long talks about it. And also her mother ended up like making this prototype of a little plush toy and everything. Yeah, you know it. And I don't know if you know, there's like this organization called Women in Toys. So she was going to talk to her mentor. I know, it sounds a little salacious, doesn't it?
I was going to say, that sounds kind of dirty to
Yes,
me.
I know.
And the podcast takes a turn. Yes.
Ladies, yeah. But
So what have you been doing to market this book?
Yeah, well, I have to say I wish I could do a little bit more, but I'm working full time. I've had a spouse who's had some health challenges and all that, but did have kind of a couple of soft launch events at a Metro Atlanta bookstore that was very sweet. Oh my gosh, they carried a couple of copies and they sold them, and they called me. It's like, we need more, and I can't tell you how many. I'd like to say it was a couple of dozen. They're like, this has never happened before. We've never sold so many. But I had a book signing and a reading at a couple of places. That was Tall Tales, and then the Abernathy Arts Center. And I think I'm ready. I've been giving the book away. I mean, I have to say, if I was in Maine recently, and there's this little library in Oakland, Maine, and I walked in, and the assistant librarian was delighted to have it. But I mean, I'm looking for 2024 as like Turtle Rocks tour. So mapping it out in Irvine, California, believe it or not, there's a whole Turtle Rocks trail and Turtle Rocks Elementary, et cetera, et cetera. So it's like, got to start there and maybe, head out west and come on back.
Sell that book.
Yeah. And I did not start it as a sales thing, I have to admit. It was a passion project. It was a story I just felt was important to me. And I kind of read it by myself. And, but what the heck? Maybe, other people might benefit from the message also.
Right. And it's a good message. It's a good, positive message. Yeah.
Well, I cannot believe this, but a friend of mine had the book on her, I guess coffee table in her living room, and a friend of hers came over, this up in Maine, came over and was, I guess, cat sitting or house sitting, and she saw the book and happens to be a minister also, and she ended up using the book as the inspiration for her, like, children's sermon that next
Oh, that's
Sunday.
wonderful.
Yeah.
Yes.
And that is exactly what you want. That is spreading positivity.
Yep.
Spreading
Yep.
the message of joy.
So tell us about another passion project that you had, which I find fascinating, is the Abandoned Mattress Project. I was just very enamored with that when you were talking about that. I was like, tell us about that.
Oh, gosh, it kind of started as a joke, I suppose. But I don't know. Many, many years ago, I remember seeing people, standing on the sides of roads with, the signs, they were homeless, they were hungry, etc. And then I would see like these mattresses just like sitting on the side. And I was like,
But not with them.
No.
Separate mattresses. Okay, yeah.
I've seen them, haven't you?
I've
people
sent her
who
pictures.
need a home and mattresses, which is to me in some ways symbolic of a home. Can't we put this together in some way? And then the other piece of it also is, I could have been an heiress to a mattress.
That's right.
But I, quote, abandoned it, as did my siblings. think part of it, Rock Island, Illinois, I just didn't see in my future. But I do give a lot of credit to that mattress factory, which, of course, I must, which, had been in the family for multiple generations and had supported me and my families, my siblings through many things. And now I'm going to get verklempt. I'm going to get emotional because really.
The Kleenex is still right there.
I can, I didn't see this with my own eyes, but my mother always told me how the first time she met my grandmother, my father's mother, she was sitting at a sewing machine, sewing a pillowcase. So, it's like these
that's
people,
awesome.
Yeah.
Family history.
Yeah. And I have a picture of the first mattress company, whatever. It was in a garage on 11th Street in Rock Island, Illinois, or 9th Street, whatever it was. Anyway, so I really felt like this confluence of this concern about people who do not have homes, as well as my history of mattresses being something that when you set up a home is so important. And I just kept seeing them, and so I'll start taking pictures. So of course, I would start with a wide shot, an establishing shot, and then go in for some close-ups, whatever the spirit called me. I just kept seeing this juxtaposition of the mattresses and people without homes, and thinking my past, abandoning the business, etc. And then I happened to be on the board of Initiative for Affordable Housing, and I approached then executive director, who has since passed away, God bless her, and said, I'd really love to do a fundraiser, and I'd love to approach a couple of galleries and see if they'd be willing to host a show. And so that's what I did. And then I set up a Facebook page, and then people started sending me pictures of abandoned mattresses.
I love it.
I sent her a few.
Yeah. I mean, and there were international submissions, and my nieces and my nephews. It really was really, really sweet. And just recently, somebody sent me a picture of a bear on a mattress. I haven't posted it yet, but yeah. And then, I have to tell you, it's kind of funny. It's warms my heart when people say things like, I passed an abandoned mattress on the road and I thought of you. Really? Oh,
I love it.
Yeah.
I love it.
I was interviewed, by the way, for Sleepopolis magazine or something. It's who knows?
Sleepopolis
Yeah, or
magazine.
something like that. I don't know. Sleep-o-matic or whatever. Yeah.
So is there anything you still want to do creatively, Audrey?
Oh, gosh. Yes, there is. A couple other books that I've been thinking about. One is about dung beetles. I got Turtles Rock.
God, the kids will love that.
Beetles roll.
Dung beetles poop.
That's right.
It's a series.
Oh, yes. Rock and roll.
Ooh.
And then also, several years ago, I developed kind of this imaginary friend, Mrs. Wind. And I have started actually writing kind of a book about her. It kind of ping-pongs back between, her reflections and my reflections. And I do believe every middle-aged woman probably, or middle-aged person, may need an imaginary friend. So anyway, it's like an inner wise person. And also, I was inspired a couple of years ago by this woman in Washington, D.C., Karen Lash, who had started a project on a wooden fence behind her Georgetown condo, where she used plastic bottle caps to create different images, and like the words vote or floral images or that kind of thing. So I've been collecting plastic bottle caps, various colors, shapes, and sizes.
And what have you been doing with them?
Collecting them.
Okay, good.
Yeah, and I did make a little postcardy kind of picture.
You're making art out of it.
Anything about stand-up comedy?
Oh, gosh. I had to go there.
I
have been thinking of doing this comedic routine as a rabbi. Her nom de pulpit would be Rabbi Rainbow Shalom. And actually, she has a middle name, Rainbow Namaste Shalom, that came to me during a yoga class. But my problem is, though, I only have one joke.
Okay.
So I would be willing to share it.
I think you should.
I don't want anyone to steal it, though.
I really think you should. Yeah.
But I do have to give credit to Reverend Marthame Sanders for giving me this joke. And that was, why did you want to be a member of the clergy? And that was for free parking at hospitals. So but I clearly need some more jokes. Need more jokes.
Sound effects.
But it's all about the couture, the shawls and all that kind of stuff.
Okay. Yes.
Well, we've come to the end of the questions.
Uh-oh.
The question portion.
And now we're going to play what decade did these phrases or words come from? We're going to play a little
A
game.
little brief game
little
show.
game.
But we're going to finish up our delicious cocktail first.
Yeah,
Here we
it's
go.
just so good. I'm right at the cherry. It's like stuck.
These glasses are so beautiful, but it's interesting. They have the cherry almost acts as a plug.
Right, it does.
Right?
Yeah.
Well, it's because they're champagne glasses. Actually, they're not. They're not actually the glasses that we're supposed to use. But all the pictures I saw had these beautiful glasses that were shaped like this. So I pulled these out of a box and
Very
thought we'd
cool.
use these instead of a martini glass.
Yeah,
you know.
Indeed.
beautiful.
So the last sip, here we go, and then
Okay.
the game show. Go
Okay,
for,
so
go
the
for
game show is, let me explain. What we're going to do is
Okay.
give you a word or
Okay.
a phrase, and you're going to tell us what decade you think it came from.
Oh my
From the
God.
60s through like 2010s, let's say, all right? And then at the end, we're going to give you 3 of these, and then we're going to give you a modern phrase that the kids use today, and tell us if you know what it means, which don't worry because most people don't.
Don't get it.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so our first word is choice, as in high quality, it's choice.
Oh,
What
good
decade did that
gosh.
come from?
Oh my gosh, I'm not even familiar with that as a word.
You don't remember that word being used? Oh,
No.
it's choice.
Gosh.
You never used that word?
I
Come on,
probably
guys.
heard it on
Well,
some
let me
comedy
ask,
show.
should I? I'm gonna say very early 60s.
No, that's from the 80s.
Oh,
the
yeah,
80s.
yeah,
Where
yeah.
was I?
I don't know.
I
Having
was
ba-
working too hard.
I think
so
you're having babies, maybe. Okay, the next one, crunk. Crunk. And it means, or let's get crunk. Means happy, have fun. Crunk.
I'm
what
thinking
decade?
90s.
2000s. The
Oh,
aughts.
Close.
Uh-oh, it's the
The
aughts.
aughts. Very close. Very
Okay.
close.
Okay.
All right.
Only 10 days
You'll
off.
probably know
10
this
years
one.
off.
What's your 20?
Oh my gosh.
I don't know
Oh,
that
was
one.
that the 70s?
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. Exactly.
Good girl. All right.
Oh, I think I had one of those
Yeah, yeah,
whatever in my car. Oh my god.
Okay, so the modern one, the modern word is Riz, R-I-Z-Z, Riz, as in, do you have Riz?
Do you know what it means?
What does it mean?
Not a clue. I would just have to.
Is popular with the teenagers today.
And on the TikTok,
All over the TikTok.
all over TikTok,
Oh.
says she here who is on TikTok.
I'm addicted
plenty.
to
TikTok.
TikTok.
Now
I know.
there
I'm an
is
old lady
that.
addicted to TikTok. Sorry.
Wow.
Any
I
idea?
mean, results? I don't know. Riz.
So
Wow.
really, this says a word for a mix of confidence and appeal.
Ooh.
So girl,
you
got the
oh,
Riz.
Man, I want
You
the
got it,
Riz.
too.
Yeah.
She got the Riz.
Woo, cool.
Yeah.
After a drink like this, of course.
How can you have anything but?
Uh-huh.
All right. Well, I think we've come to the end of our interview. Thank you so much for
Thank
being
you
with
so
us,
much for being with us,
Audrey.
Audrey.
Thank you.
And thank you all for listening. We really appreciate you. Please follow us on social media. We're on Instagram, YouTube, kind of all the things, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And don't forget, as my Aunt Millie says,
Shoulders back, knockers up. Cheers.
Cheers.
All right.
Blanky. Girl.